Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this webinar hosted by the MRC Trials Methodology Research Trial Conduct Working Group. I'm Chris Rogers, the Clinical Trials and Evaluation Unit at the University of Bristol, and it's my pleasure to introduce Lisa Maguire, our speaker today. Lisa is a research fellow based at the Northern Ireland Network for Trials Methodology Research at Queen's University Belfast, and she also works with the Northwest Hub for Trials Methodology Research at the University of Liverpool. Lisa is a psychologist with experience in cluster randomised trials and systematic reviews. And in this webinar, Lisa will be telling us about her experiences and the lessons that she's learnt in developing and managing a cluster randomised sexual health trial. Lisa's presentation will last around 20 minutes, following which there will be an opportunity for you to ask questions or to make comments. In case you're not familiar with how to do this in WebEx, we'll be showing you a slide later which will provide you with some guidance. So now, without any further ado, I'll hand you over to Lisa for her presentation.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for joining me over your lunch break today. As Chris has already introduced, my name is Lisa Maguire and I'm involved with a cluster randomised school-based trial that I'm going to talk to you today, along with some of the challenges that we've experienced whilst doing this. So the trial that I'm going to talk about today is really focused on unintended teenage pregnancy. So let's start by looking at the background and prevalence of teenage pregnancy. It's a worldwide public health concern, with rates in the US and the UK being amongst the highest in the developed world. Those can be as high as 54.6 per 1,000 women under 20 in the UK. And statistics show that as many as half of these pregnancies actually end in legal abortion. So unintended teenage pregnancy can lead to considerable adverse health problems for teenagers and their infants, as well as generating enormous emotional, social and economic costs for the teenagers, their families and society in general. But there is a need for high quality relationship and sexuality education, as it provides a knowledge base to assist making informed decisions about their sexual behaviour. The World Health Organization, amongst others, has recognised that teenage men have a vital but yet neglected role in reducing teenage pregnancies, and that there is a real need for educational interventions that are designed especially for them. So it is against this backdrop that the If I Were Jack resource was developed. The resource consists of an interactive video drama, classroom activities, and information for pupils, parents, teachers, and for teacher trainers as well. The core aim of If I Were Jack is to assist schools to provide pupils with opportunities for exploring the issues surrounding teenage pregnancy and parenthood, with reference to the individual, to the family, to the community, and society. If the resource is acceptable and effective, it has the potential to be rolled out to large numbers of boys and girls attending schools across the UK. Pupils will benefit from an engaging educational resource. Parents will benefit from a process designed to involve them and to support them in communicating with their child. RSE teachers will benefit because the resource will provide them with a stimulus for engaging pupils from the point of view of a teenage boy, followed by guided classroom-based activities. The photos that you see on this slide are some screenshots that are taken from the IVD. The program itself is designed to be delivered over 4 30 to 40-minute classroom-based lessons. It can be used to teach both boys and girls, and it doesn't matter if they are in mixed-sex or same-sex classrooms. The If I Were Jack interactive video drama asks pupils to put themselves into Jack's shoes and consider how they would feel and what they would do if they were Jack. Classroom materials for teachers contain 4 detailed lesson plans with specific classroom-based and homework activities, which include group discussions, role plays, worksheets, and a parent-pupil exercise. It is designed to fit within the Key Stage 4 curriculum, which is in schools from year 11 onwards. So moving on to the JAC trial then. The JAC trial is a phase 2 feasibility study with an embedded process and economic evaluation, and it's funded by the NIHR. It's cluster randomised, with the unit of randomisation being the schools. 8 schools are actually participating in the JAC trial, with over 800 pupils recruited. So the objectives of this trial are to be able to answer questions such as, could we do a large trial? So that's looking at effect sizes to calculate sample size for a phase 3 trial, looking at any differences in outcomes for male and female pupils, and identifying the costs of delivering the intervention and starting to undertake the economic analysis. So is the resource acceptable, and what would be the best way to deliver it? To find out what variation there currently exists in normal RSE practice within those schools. Is participation in the trial actually acceptable? So we want to establish participation rates across different types of schools, looking at recruitment, looking at retention rates. And do we use acceptable outcome measures? So how can we develop and refine these for a possible phase 3 trial? So these are the questions that we hope the JAC trial is going to answer for us. Participating schools are randomised prior to baseline to either the intervention group or to the control group. 4 schools are randomised to the intervention group, and this group will receive the If I Were JAC resource, and the RSE teachers will deliver it to their year 11 pupils. The 4 schools that have been allocated to the control group will continue on with their normal RSE practice without the If I Were JAC resource. However, as a thank you for participating as a control school, they will actually be allowed to deliver the resource, but only once the trial has actually ended. If you are interested in learning more about the JAC trial, then we have published the protocol last year in the International Journal of Educational Research. So I would recommend that you access that. It contains a lot of information about how and why we've set up the trial in the way that we have. We have faced some challenges in the JAC trial because a trial really, well, it wouldn't be a trial without some sort of challenges really. So some of those we did anticipate in advance, and we're trying to put protocols in place to deal with those right from the outset. The specific challenges I've categorised in this presentation are those of school recruitment, participant recruitment, retention, the development of appropriate measures, and collecting sensitive information. So I'm now going to go through each of these categories and explain what the challenges that we found were and how we've attempted to overcome them. In Northern Ireland, there are quite a few different school management types. So we've got things like controlled, maintained, integrated, voluntary, as well as different schools such as grammar and secondary. When planning this trial, we felt we should try to sample schools from all of these. So we plan to stratify our sample by type as well as by deprivation. We did anticipate potential challenges in recruiting Roman Catholic schools due to the fact that some may perceive If I Were JAC as being incompatible with their Catholic ethos in the sense that it refers to issues such as contraception and abortion as well as just abstinence. We also anticipated that there would be a greater uptake of the intervention in deprived areas where teenage birth rates are generally much higher. So, however, whilst we had no difficulties in recruiting schools from deprived areas, we did have a few difficulties recruiting Roman Catholic secondary schools, and we had major problems in recruiting Roman Catholic grammar schools, although we actually did reach our recruitment target in the end, but we also had difficulties in recruiting sort of privately funded, voluntary managed grammar schools. We used 3 strategies to actually recruit the schools. So firstly, it was via RSE teacher training events. Then we went to personal introductions by members of the advisory and steering group. And finally, through a cold call invitation. Regardless of the strategy used, all schools were posted a formal letter of invitation and an information sheet, which included detailed information on what would be involved upon consenting to participate. including the estimates of required time and resources. This was followed within about a week of posting the letter with a phone call to the principal. And in most cases, it required several attempts to contact and actually be in contact with the principal before the school made a decision on whether or not they were likely to participate. What we found using the strategy was that the recruitment of schools via RSE training events was by far the most successful strategy, leading to 70% of schools invited being randomised into the study. The invitation following a personal introduction by the steering group or advisory committee led to the recruitment of one additional school, and it was actually a 20% recruitment rate from that type of recruitment. Interestingly, though, perhaps not unsurprisingly, cold call invitation was unsuccessful, with all 6 schools approached declining to take part. So I think that demonstrates that a personal first approach, where we were able to briefly explain the resource in a face-to-face environment, was most beneficial and preferred where it's possible to be able to do so. So on this slide, I've listed some of the things that schools have said to us when we've discussed the trial with them. These have ranged from definite no's, saying things like, it won't be applicable to us as our school has never had a teenage pregnancy, to, well, we're already involved in a research project, and therefore for time reasons and an already packed curriculum, they would not be able to participate any further. Then we had concerns about taking part, such as, is this resource in line with our ethos? We find, as I mentioned earlier, that this was an issue for some of the faith-based schools. And other concerns were worries about being in the comparison or control group. To allay those fears, we assured the schools that they would be able to deliver the If I Were Jack resource once the trial was over. But finally, we had a lot of really positive feedback, such as teachers saying and principals saying, you know, we really need this resource because there isn't anything like this for us currently for the curriculum. Once we successfully recruited our schools, we then looked to getting participants recruited into our trial. It's always difficult to recruit to any trial, but there are additional difficulties when you're dealing with sensitive information and when you're consenting children and young people. Firstly, parents were contacted about the study and asked to provide their consent for the research team to be able to approach their child and ask them if they wanted to participate. Teachers were therefore provided with information sheets to distribute 1 week prior to the data collection to the Year 11 pupils themselves, only to those whose parents had not withdrawn them from the study. They were asked to encourage pupils to read the information sheet and inform them that they would have the opportunity to ask us any questions about it and decide whether or not they wanted to take part before the beginning of the questionnaire the following week. So, at the beginning of the baseline data collection sessions, the researcher spent about 15 minutes explaining the research to the pupils, giving them the opportunity to ask any questions, and then they asked them to complete a consent form indicating whether or not they wanted to take part. It emerged at this point that in 2 schools, the teachers had actually forgotten to distribute the information sheets to pupils before we arrived in the school, and that's sort of type of issue that can be quite common in schools-based research and actually does kind of hold things up for us in that way. In total, we got 822 pupils recruited into the study at baseline, and that represents an overall recruitment rate of approximately 81%. The parental withdrawal of consent accounted for 7% of the loss, and pupil opt-out was around 4%. Pupil absence or just unavailability at the baseline data collection point accounted for the remaining 9% of the loss. We currently have a paper written and it's in submission to a journal that describes this in detail, our experiences about recruiting for the JAC trial, and hopefully that will be published soon. Retention is another challenge. In schools-based research, we are hugely dependent upon the goodwill and the cooperation of the schools involved to continue to facilitate the research. And this can be a big ask. We're asking them to timetable space into an already full curriculum and to facilitate questionnaire completion and also to organise classroom space that would be suitable for us. Probably the key to ensuring this is keeping a really good relationship with the school themselves, just thanking them often, always keeping them informed of our timelines and our requirements, etc. In a way, it did actually help the JAC trial that the schools were really eager and excited by the resource. So they were happy to take part and happy to facilitate us because they were actually getting something out of it as well that they really needed. We do have problems with absenteeism. So unfortunately, when data collection occurs in schools, there can often be pupils off school that day or engaged with other activities such as they're being part of a mentorship program or they're away for a sports event. And that means they're just not going to be in class at the time that we're allowed in. In these cases, we're trying to make sure that we can collect this data from them by leaving copies of the questionnaire at the school and asking the teachers if they could facilitate the completion for us. One final issue that we had was the timing of our data collection. So we found that having data collection too close to the end of term means that there are large numbers of children out of class, either because they're taken off school early because it's the end of the year, or they're involved with other activities. They might be out at a sports day, or they could be away practicing for a school play. So that also does have an effect on retention. Another challenge we faced was how to develop appropriate measurements, particularly how can we actually measure success in the JAC trial. So are we defining success as fewer pregnancies, less sex, fewer STIs, or are we interested more in the sort of changes in knowledge, attitudes and behaviour that will possibly in the future lead on to those first few outcomes? There are 3 data collection points in JAC. You've got baseline, then 5 months post-intervention and 9 months post-intervention. The other issue we have is how do we conduct the data collection? So which is going to be better? Should we use traditional pen and paper measurements, or should we move to a more sort of computerized data collection method? So here are the outcome measures that we actually decided upon. So first of all, we're measuring knowledge, and that's an example of a questionnaire. It's like a girl cannot get pregnant the first time she has penetrative sex, and those are all true and false questions. Then communication skills, so we're asking things like, how comfortable are you talking with a health professional about contraception? Then we're interested in measuring the beliefs about the capabilities in avoiding unattended pregnancy. So we're saying things like, when thinking about future sexual encounters, how likely is it that you would feel okay about saying no if you didn't want to have sex? And finally, we also measure the avoidance of sexual risk-taking behaviour. So we're asking them things like, the last time you had penetrative sex, did you or your partner use any form of contraception? Or behaviour. So we're saying things like, have you ever been pregnant? Or for boys, have you ever gotten a girl pregnant? So we decided to test out then whether or not we could use computerized questionnaires in a phase 3 trial, or whether we should just continue with traditional paper. The image on the left is a screenshot of the first page of our online version, and the paper version is the one to the right. We were initially attracted to the computerized version as it's very low cost. You know, you pay to set up the website and you pay to set up a database to collect the data into. But you're going to save then on data inputting costs and data, to a large extent, data cleaning costs, because all that will be done via the actual online version itself. The computer version does have other benefits. It is particularly good for those with visual difficulties because they can adjust the size of the screen. As the first image on the slide shows at the top, you can check that items haven't been, answered on purpose by bringing up a reminder, so that minimizes accidental missing data. So it's okay to miss a question, but we're just checking that they meant to leave that question out. Looking at the bottom, the second image on your screen, you can see how you can actually add in these little hover over definitions, which are really useful for the participant because they help if they have any difficulties and they don't want to ask what a certain word means, they can simply hover over it, brings up a definition. But something like that can be quite difficult to incorporate into a paper questionnaire within the actual question because it just completely clutters up the page. So what we had been doing for the paper ones is providing them with a separate definition list that they could go back and forth to if they felt that they didn't understand any of the words used. The difficulties in using computers is that it can be difficult for a school to schedule data collection to be able to occur in the computer labs. So, and that's problematic as well. Perhaps they don't have enough computers, or they only have one lab and we want to come in and do the entire year group. It also required us to spend a lot of time up front with the school network providers to ensure that the questionnaire would actually pass the internet content blockers, particularly because of the wording of the questions that we're asking in the JAC trial. Ultimately, it is unfortunate that on this occasion we were not able to successfully use the computerized version due mainly to database design issues, including the ability to handle a large number of login requests at once, because we could have scenarios where the entire year group is completing the questionnaire at the same time. And because of these concerns about the database that we were using, we decided not to continue on with this route for our subsequent follow-up, so we just moved solely to back to the paper versions. So one final challenge I want to discuss is how to collect sensitive information. So firstly, there's the classroom environment. Now, no two classrooms are the same in their makeup, so some classrooms have plenty of space and some the students are actually really tightly together. So when they're filling out their questionnaire, it's very easy for the people sitting next to them to be able to look over their shoulder and see what they're writing and see what their answers are. So there's a certain worry that how could we manage that? We can't always do anything about that because the classroom, it is what we're given, and we can't, you know, say, no, we can't use this room if it's the only room possible. So we try to get past that by asking the children to respect each other's privacy and try not to look over someone else's shoulder because we're only interested in your answers and their answers are private. There are also confidentiality issues, so that students are concerned when they're completing it because we have to link them together. So what we were doing was using a barcoding system that creates a unique ID number for people, and that barcode is on all of their questionnaires, and that number is on all of their questionnaires. And when we hand out the questionnaire, the number is on the front with the barcode, and that is placed within an envelope that has the same barcode and number, but it also shows their name, so that we can make sure that we're giving out the right ID number to the right pupil. And I think that they do have concerns around whether or not that is truly confidential. There's also the issue that we tell them that no one else is going to see this other than ourselves. But if there are things that they disclose within the questionnaire that we think is a child protection issue, that we might have to report that to the necessary authorities. I think that sort of idea is something that's quite difficult for the children to really understand properly. Also, we've got different terminology, so I've touched upon that before, where you could use definitions. So our definitions are maybe not always the right definition to use. They may not always be reflective of the language that teenagers today use. So I find when they do ask questions that they actually do know the answer, it's just they've never heard the word or that particular term. So we have been working throughout the JAC trial, and at each data point we have focus groups with the young people, and we're constantly trying to refine the type of terms that we use and the way that we explain those terms as well. So this slide shows the size of the trial team. There are 12 of us in total. Not all are pictured in that photograph, unfortunately. We're a team of colleagues from Queen's University, from Glasgow Caledonian, from the MRC in Glasgow, and from the Northern Ireland Clinical Trials Unit. And it's amongst all of us that are working together on this particular trial. Now, I know we're going to move on to a discussion in a little moment, but if you aren't able to participate in the discussion that's about to happen and you want to ask me something, then please do contact me on that email address. Also, you could access our If I Were JAC website, which contains a lot of information. So I'd recommend if you want to have a look at that, that would be lovely. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Lisa, for your presentation. Now we have time for some questions. If you have a functional microphone or a telephone connection and wish to speak directly to Lisa, please follow the instructions to raise your hand. Alternatively, please type your question in the Q&A panel and then I will read it out on your behalf. We don't have any questions coming in just for a minute, so can I just sort of kick off the questions? And Lisa, I wonder, can you tell us what was the reaction from the teachers and the pupils to the If I Were Jack resource?
Yes, thanks, Chris. It's been really positive. The teachers, we actually involved teachers back in the beginning when we were designing the resource. The teachers feel that it's something that is there ready. It's a package that they are able to go ahead and use, and they don't have anything else like that in the curriculum. They report that the students, when they're watching the IVDs, they're really, really like glued to the screen. They're so interested. It's such a different thing, and it's much more engaging for them. And it really opens up a great discussion. You know, they were worried about, you know, would this work for discussions, and they found it was really good. And the children that we've spoken to are really positive about it. They have enjoyed it, and they get something out of it, which is really good.
Oh, that sounds excellent. It does sound a really positive resource and something that's better for them to engage into. Does anyone else have some questions for Lisa? Okay, we have one question. I'm not quite sure if I can tell who it's from, so I apologise for that. I'm just trying to practice with the IT. But the question that's come in, Lisa, is what age are the Year 11 students in Ireland? Sorry, this has come from the hub.
Yeah, Year 11 starts sort of about age 14. So they can be, within the JAC trial, they'll be ranging in age from 14 to 16.
Okay. Anybody else? Can I just then, while other people are perhaps typing their questions, could you tell us a little bit more about the consent process? You mentioned that I think some of the teachers sort of didn't give out the information sheets. Did you find variation in the sort of the consent process across the different types of schools?
No, I think it was only really in those two schools, and it was just a breakdown in sort of internal communications. So it's unfortunate, but that just meant that we had to spend extra time with the children whilst we were there, so we were a bit more rushed. We had to give them time, we had to hand out extra forms, give them time to read through everything and really try and explain things to them. We did have we went parental opt-out for the study, and there were parents that did avail of that opt-out. It can be difficult in cluster randomised trials of interventions within schools because there's always the concern, the parents are sometimes I feel confused about what they're actually opting out of. So for JAC, they could only opt out really off the trial, but regardless, the school was still going to be implementing the resource. So they're not opting out of their child, so they're doing that, but they're opting out of our particular work. And opt-out for us it's easier because with parents, you know, if we send stuff home, things can get signed but never actually get returned. It's easy to forget, so we felt that that's better, opt-out, and we did get ethical approval for that. So.
Okay, we have one further question that's come in from the CTSU, and they're asking, is there a plan to introduce the trial for younger year groups?
Currently, no. There isn't currently because we focused on Year 11 because it was felt that sort of there was a reasoning behind that was a good place for it. It's the time whenever they are starting to get much more RSE education anyway, so it fits in with the curriculum there. So for the trial, if we were to go forward for a future phase 3 trial, we would still be aiming to start it at age 14.
Okay. Well, if we don't have any further questions from anybody, then I think perhaps we're sort of to the point of wrapping up. So presumably, if anyone has any further questions after, oh, sorry, there is another question that's just come in from Alvin. Where do I find that? Excuse me a minute. Alvin, let's see if I can unmute Alvin. Scroll up. Sorry, I'm getting messages. Right, I found the... Sorry, I can't actually see the question from Alvin, and nor can I work out how to unmute him at the minute. I'm sorry. Ah, here we go. Are the resources and the questionnaires relevant, sensitive to students who do not identify themselves as heterosexual?
We do ask that question to begin with to see how they are identifying themselves with, although it is explained at the start that for this particular questionnaire we are, because it is the JAC resource is about reducing unintended teenage pregnancy, that we say from the outset we are only interested for this purpose of between the relationship between girls and boys. But we do tap into, there are a few questions that try and figure out what their perspective is on that.
Okay, do we have any questions from anybody else? In that case, I think we'll sort of move to wrapping up. Firstly, just to let you know, we've been recording today's webinar, including the Q&A session, and we'll be emailing you a link with this within the week. And you can use this link to listen again or to share it with anyone else that you think might be interested. Also, in about a week, it should be possible for anyone to access the recording of the webinar as well as the previous webinars via the HTMR network website. Secondly, there won't be a webinar in November as many of us will be meeting in Glasgow, and we're in the process of finalising the webinar for December. Invitations for that, including the link to pre-register, will be distributed through the usual channels. So please look out for those. And finally, it just remains for me to say thank you to all of you for joining the webinar today, and especially to Lisa for her very clear and informative presentation and for fielding your questions. I hope you'll all join us again soon next time. Thank you and have a good day. Bye-bye.